Welcome to part 2. I just got my encounter with Jool. I have been sucked up by its gravity, and so here I am setting up a maneuver to get into a proper orbit so that I'm not flung off into deep space. And yeah, this is the point where I try and get it as low down as I can, and to try and maybe skim the atmosphere, but again, it's quite difficult when you're over 1,000,000 kilometers away to get the maneuver precise enough to do that. Because yeah, an aero capture would be ideal to save on fuel, but we'll do that once we get a bit closer. So yeah, these weak poodle engines are pushing this giant bloated fuel tank around. And yes, I spend quite a bit of fuel actually getting into an orbit here, which, I mean, that does mean that the transfer probably wasn't very efficient, but yeah, that's... So, yeah, I'm just pulling it down here, just nudging the thrust until I gently graze into the atmosphere, and then I actually push it down too far. And yeah, there, I got the periaps down to about 117 kilometers there, which takes you through Jool's atmosphere. It's not very tall, the atmosphere, considering it is a gas giant. But yeah, there is a theoretical surface under there somewhere, because, you know, it's a video game, and it's not, yeah, I accidentally just went at 1,000,000 times speed past the planet there and wasn't paying attention. And so yeah, despite it being a gas giant, you don't actually need to go that high up to find the atmosphere. And there it is, looming up on us, with the little marble that is lathe floating around it there. And yeah, it is ominous when you go this close to the planet. And here's aerobraking. I think I quick saved at some point before this, because I wasn't sure if those solar panels would just come flying off. But nope, they're fine. So yeah, very strong solar panels. It's a bit strange, really. I mean, they just sort of crumple in Kerbin's atmosphere, but then you blast through the atmosphere of a gas giant at 6,000 meters a second, and somehow they're fine. And yeah, here I was fiddling with maneuver nodes once I got into an orbit around Jool. I just theorized that these RCS ports on the tiny little probe would have enough delta V to transfer to a lathe orbit. And I tried it out, and here I am, just set up a maneuver node to get a nice close encounter. And yeah, I'm just firing these little thrusters. And yeah, I mean, I've used half the fuel already there in a couple of seconds without getting enough delta V to burn down. But as you burn off the monopropellant, the thrust to weight ratio increases, and you start, you know, burning higher delta V. And so the fuel runs out at the same speed, but the delta V is going down faster and faster and faster. And it's so close. It's so close. And we just get an encounter. Just like that. And I just pull the periaps down so that it skims through the atmosphere so I can aero capture. And yes, my little mouse cursor does a dance of joy around the 1 unit of monopropellant that I have left. And that's a screenshot moment. And so yeah, I was just gonna. I mean, the atmosphere in Lathe is more dense than Kerbin's, so I just thought about pulling the solar panels in, but then I'm going around the dark side of the planet, so I decided to just pull one in. We can live with just one. And yeah, here I realized that I did not aerobrake enough. I did not come down into the atmosphere, and I used that 1 unit of RCS fuel. I just blasted it and put it into an orbit with just that 1 unit. If I'd had maybe 0.1 or 0.2 units less, I would not have been in an orbit, which is quite remarkable, really. I mean, but of course now this little probe does actually pass through the atmosphere on each orbit at its periapses. So, you know, it'll orbit for quite a long time because it's only dipping into the upper atmosphere for a few minutes on each orbit, but it will eventually decay. But that's fine. I turn on the sciencey things and leave it there to transmit sciencey stuff back to the space center. It's done its job. And so now I'm taking the whole stack, using the main engines this time, out to Val. Because yeah, I think I got lucky, actually, getting into late orbit there. I mean, I did no calculations. I just went, I think this thing has that much delta V. And yeah, I took a punt and it worked, which is nice. And so yeah, here I am trying not to blast into Lathe, because yeah, that's the problem with trying to transfer around the Jool system, is you just keep getting encounters with moons you don't want to go to. See there, it just keeps happening. I keep bumping into Lathe's orbit. But there we get a Val encounter, and I'm just adjusting it to get it nice and close, because Val has no atmosphere, of course. And so yeah, you can't do any aerobraking or anything, so you have to get nice and close to be able to get into a stable orbit. And you can see the craft just starts going mental at this point. I don't know why. It's something to do with the SAS. If I turn it on, then it would just start wobbling all over the place like crazy. I mean, the SAS does still have some bugs with it, I think. I mean, it's never been perfect, but yeah, I just got all the way out here without any problems, and then suddenly the SAS units start flinging it around like a ragdoll. So yeah, here I am again trying to get a maneuver to get us to Val, and failing miserably. Well, we're on a wildly eccentric orbit, and I don't want to waste any fuel circularizing it, and so you know, it's quite tough to see where you should actually burn and when you should actually burn, and yeah, every time I pass around the dark side of Jool, which is where the periapse is, it's the power runs out because I only have solar panels. There it goes, wobbling around again. Yeah, I probably should have reloaded the game at that point, but I couldn't be bothered. And so yeah, I mean, the periapse would be it goes crazy. Yeah, the periapse is the most efficient place to make the transfer burn, but it's too dark there, so I had to do it just before. And here I am, I'm making my transfer finally to Val. Highly inefficient, going right past the orbit, but there it is, the little ice moon. And so yeah, I checked how much delta V I needed to get into orbit, and I thought it was roughly the same amount as I had in these little probes, you know, from my little adventure to Leith. So I just spin that around to make sure it's on the right side. And try and use the RCS fuel again to get into orbit around Val. And yep, just a jump cut there because it took a few minutes. And I run out of fuel without getting into orbit. So there is the first failure, well, the second failure if you count losing an engine, of this mission. It fails to get into orbit and ends up just floating around Jool. And so I try to get the rest of the probes out into the outer moons with the limited amount of fuel that I have left. But it's going to be very difficult now. I have about a quarter of a tank of fuel left here, and yeah, I was just after the Val encounter, I just had to raise my periaps as well. I had to use up fuel to do that because it had fallen well into the atmosphere, and so, you know, I would have ended up aero braking and possibly crashing into the surface. But so here I'm trying to set up an encounter with Tylo, which I don't think I've ever been, actually. I don't think I've ever been to Tylo or landed on it. I've been playing this game a while. There are a few places I haven't been to yet. And again, we're not on a circular orbit, and yeah, here Leith gets in the way again, and I just cock it up majorly. You know, I was just like, well, I'll just fire prograde here, just to widen the orbit, right? And then that all pushes away from Leith's influence. Except that it doesn't at all until we've run out of fuel and we're basically crashing into Jool. So, and yeah, like I was saying earlier about those tanks being uneven with fuel, and that I'd remember that, I forgot. And so it just started flying around in circles. And then here, I set up this maneuver node, and I was just like, oh, I got a Tylo encounter there, and that's possibly enough delta V to use these RCS ports. I detach one of them to do the maneuver, and for some reason I just fast forward right into Jool's atmosphere. I really wasn't paying attention. And so, yeah, boom, there goes the solar panels, and there goes the probe into Jool's atmosphere. And yeah, I gave up trying to rescue this probe and the others as well. It's they can send back some data about what it's like to be crushed by the massive gravity of a gas giant, and maybe some atmospheric data or something. But so yeah, I just spin it down to the surface and kaboom, there it goes. And at this point I just I basically give up on the mission. It's been a massive failure. I don't have enough fuel to get the rest of the probes into orbit, and so I just renamed the one success from this mission. And thank you for watching, and thank you for putting up with my enormous scientific failure. I'll see you next time.